The Los Angeles sun beat down mercilessly on the sprawling Mediterranean-style mansion in Beverly Hills, its white walls almost blinding in the afternoon light. Behind the iron gates and manicured hedges lived a man the world thought they knew, Michael Barrett, Academy Award winner, box office king. America's sweetheart turned America's most eligible bachelor after tragedy struck his life 3 years ago. But the man behind those gates was nothing like the charismatic figure who graced red carpets and talk show couches. He was a ghost. Hollow and silent, moving through rooms filled with memories he couldn't bear to face. This is a story about loss, unexpected connections, and how sometimes the people we least expect can remind us what it means to be alive again. But be warned, nothing in this story is quite what it seems, and by the end, you'll question everything you thought you knew about grief, loyalty, and the secrets we keep to protect the ones we love. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love connecting with viewers from all around the world, and if you enjoy stories that touch your heart and make you think, hit that subscribe button. We've got more incredible, true-to-life stories coming your way that you won't want to miss. The kitchen was spotless, as it always was. Elena Morales stood at the marble counter, her worn hands methodically preparing lunch that would likely go untouched. She'd been working as Michael Barrett's housekeeper for exactly 2 months, and in that time, she'd spoken more words to the empty rooms than to her employer. He was a presence more than a person, a shadow that drifted from his bedroom to his study, occasionally to the home theater in the basement where he'd watch his old films with the sound turned off. Elena was 53, a woman whose face told stories of hard years, but whose eyes still held warmth. She'd come to Los Angeles from El Salvador 20 years ago, worked every job imaginable, sent money home to her mother and younger sister, and recently lost her husband to cancer. The hospice social worker had suggested she find work that kept her busy, kept her mind occupied. Michael's agent had hired her through a staffing agency. The pay was generous, the work was easy, the loneliness was suffocating. She plated the grilled chicken salad, added the dressing on the side as per the instructions left by his nutritionist, and carried it upstairs. The house was a museum of a life interrupted. Photos of Michael and his late wife Caroline lined the hallway. Caroline had been a director, brilliant and beloved, with wild curly hair and a smile that seemed to leap out of every photograph. They'd been Hollywood's golden couple, the rare pair who'd actually seemed happy, who'd made it work despite the industry's crushing pressure. Then came the car accident on Pacific Coast Highway. A drunk driver. Caroline died instantly. Michael walked away without a scratch, at least physically. Elena knocked softly on the study door. "Mr. Barrett, your lunch is ready." Silence. Always silence. She pushed the door open. Michael sat in his leather chair, facing the window that overlooked the pool and the city beyond. He was 45 but looked older, his once vibrant brown hair now streaked with gray, his athletic frame thinner than it should be. He wore the same thing he always wore, gray sweatpants and a black t-shirt. His feet were bare. He didn't turn around. "I'll leave it on the desk," Elena said quietly. She set down the plate, hesitated, then spoke again. "It's a beautiful day outside. The jasmine is blooming. You can smell it all the way from the garden." Nothing, not even an acknowledgement that she'd spoken. Elena had learned not to expect responses, but something about today felt different. Maybe it was the anniversary creeping up, 3 years since Caroline's death. Or maybe it was her own grief, still raw despite the months that had passed since her husband took his last breath in that sterile hospital room. She understood Michael's silence because she knew what it was like to have words feel completely inadequate in the face of loss. As she turned to leave, she noticed something on his desk she hadn't seen before. A bottle of sleeping pills, the prescription label dated from 2 years ago. It was full. Beside it, a nearly empty bottle of whiskey. Her heart clenched. "Mr. Barrett," she said, her voice firmer now. "When was the last time you ate something?" His shoulders tensed slightly. That was something at least. "I know you don't know me," Elena continued, surprised by her own boldness. "And I know I'm just the housekeeper, but I also know what it's like to lose someone who meant everything. My husband, Roberto, he died 7 months ago. Pancreatic cancer. We had 28 years together." She waited, watching the back of his head for any sign of response. "He used to tell me that grief isn't something you get over. It's something you learn to carry, like a stone in your pocket. Some days it feels light. Some days it feels like it might drag you under the water. But you keep swimming." Michael's hand moved, reaching for the whiskey bottle, then stopping halfway. His fingers curled into a fist. "Caroline would want you to keep swimming," Elena said softly. That did it. Michael's voice came out rough, barely above a whisper. The first words he'd spoken to her in 2 months. "You don't know what Caroline would want." It wasn't angry. It was broken. You're right, Elena said. I don't, but I know what Roberto would want for me. He'd want me to find reasons to smile again, to remember that loving someone doesn't end just because they're gone. It changes, but it doesn't end. She left before he could respond, closing the door quietly behind her. Her hands were shaking. She'd overstepped. She was sure of it. By tomorrow, the staffing agency would probably call to tell her she'd been let go. But something had compelled her to speak, some recognition of a fellow drowning person. 3 hours later, Elena was vacuuming the living room when she heard footsteps on the stairs. She turned off the machine and looked up to see Michael standing in the doorway. He was holding the empty plate. "Thank you for lunch," he said, his voice still rough from disuse. "It was good." Elena's eyes widened slightly. "You're welcome." They stood there for a moment. Two broken people in a house filled with ghosts. "I'm sorry for your loss," Michael added. "Your husband, Roberto. And I'm sorry for yours." He nodded, handed her the plate, and disappeared back upstairs. It wasn't much, but it was something. The stone in the pocket had shifted just slightly. Over the following weeks, something subtle began to change. Michael started leaving his study more often. He'd come downstairs in the mornings, make coffee, sit at the kitchen counter while Elena prepared breakfast. They didn't talk much at first, just shared the same space. But gradually, carefully, conversations began to form. Elena learned that Michael hadn't worked in 3 years, turning down every script, every offer. His agent called weekly, begging him to consider coming back. His co-stars reached out. Directors who'd worked with him sent personal letters. He ignored them all. The world wanted Michael Barrett, the movie star. He couldn't bear to be that person anymore. Michael learned that Elena had a daughter, Sophia, who was studying nursing at UCLA, that she loved old movies, particularly the black and white ones from the golden age of Hollywood, that she could make empanadas that tasted like home, whatever home meant, that she sang while she cleaned, usually in Spanish, songs that made the empty house feel less haunted. One Thursday morning, Michael came downstairs to find Elena in the living room, staring at one of the photos of him and Caroline. She didn't hear him approach. "That was at the Oscars," Michael said, making her jump slightly. "The year she won for Best Director. She was so nervous during the ceremony, she kept making me check if she had food in her teeth." Elena smiled. She was beautiful. She was extraordinary. Michael moved closer to the photo. Everyone knew her as this fierce, brilliant filmmaker. But at home, she was goofy. She'd do impressions of our neighbors. She couldn't cook to save her life, but she'd try anyway. And we'd end up ordering takeout while laughing at whatever disaster she'd created. It was the most he'd said about Caroline since the accident. Elena stayed quiet, letting him talk. "The drunk driver who hit us, he survived. Got 8 years. He'll be out in 6 with good behavior." Michael's jaw tightened. 6 years for killing the most important person in the world. "Grief and anger are close cousins," Elena said gently. "But anger will eat you alive if you let it." "How did you do it?" Michael asked, turning to face her. "How did you keep going after Roberto died?" Elena thought about it, choosing her words carefully. "I didn't have a choice at first. Sophia needed me. The bills needed to be paid. Life kept demanding things from me. But then, slowly, I realized I wasn't just going through the motions anymore. I was living again, even though it felt like betrayal at first." "That's exactly it," Michael said, his voice intense. "It feels like betrayal. Every moment I'm not drowning in grief feels like I'm forgetting her." "You won't forget her," Elena assured him. "That's not how love works. But you can honor her memory by living the life she'd want you to live." "Did Caroline want you to be miserable?" Michael's laugh was bitter. "She'd be furious. She'd tell me I was being dramatic and self-indulgent. Then maybe you should listen to her." Something shifted in Michael's face. For the first time, Elena saw a flicker of the man he used to be, the one who lit up movie screens and made audiences believe in heroes. The next morning, Michael came downstairs showered and dressed in actual clothes, jeans and a button-down shirt. Elena was so surprised she nearly dropped the coffee pot. "I have a meeting with my agent," he said, looking almost embarrassed. "Just to talk. No commitments." Elena's smile was genuine. "That's good. That's really good. Don't get excited. I'm probably just going to tell him no to everything like I always do." "Maybe, but you're trying. That's what matters." After Michael left, Elena continued with her work, but she felt lighter somehow. Over the past weeks, helping Michael find his way back to life had given her own days new purpose. She thought about Roberto less painfully now, remembering the good times instead of just the hospital room at the end. Maybe they were healing each other. She was watering the plants on the back patio when she heard the doorbell ring. Unusual. Michael rarely had visitors. She walked through the house and opened the front door to find a woman in her late 30s, stylishly dressed, with sharp green eyes and an appraising look. "Can I help you?" Elena asked. "I'm here to see Michael." Is he home? He's out at a meeting. May I ask who's calling? The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. I'm Vanessa Pierce. I'm a friend, an old friend. Something about the way she said friend made Elena's instincts prickle with warning. Would you like to leave a message? I'll wait if that's all right. Michael and I have important things to discuss. Elena hesitated, then stepped aside to let her in. Vanessa walked through the foyer with the familiarity of someone who'd been there before, her heels clicking on the marble floor. She settled on the living room couch, crossing her legs elegantly. Can I get you something to drink? Elena offered. Water would be fine, thank you. When Elena returned with the water, Vanessa was looking at the photos of Michael and Caroline with an expression that was difficult to read. They were quite the couple, Vanessa said. I was actually Caroline's assistant before she died. I worked with her for 5 years. I didn't know that, Elena said carefully. There's a lot of things about Caroline and Michael's relationship that people don't know. Vanessa took a sip of water. The perfect Hollywood marriage isn't always so perfect behind closed doors. Elena felt her defenses rise. I don't think Mr. Barrett would appreciate you discussing his private life with the housekeeper. Vanessa's laugh was sharp. Oh, honey, I'm not discussing anything. But since you seem to be getting close to him, you should know what you're dealing with. Michael Barrett isn't the grieving widower everyone thinks he is. Before Elena could respond, they heard the garage door opening. Michael was home. Vanessa stood up, smoothing her dress, a calculating look in her eyes. Michael walked into the living room and stopped dead when he saw Vanessa. All the color drained from his face. Hello, Michael, Vanessa said, her voice suddenly soft, almost intimate. It's been a while. What are you doing here? Michael's voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk. Privately. Vanessa glanced at Elena meaningfully. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of Elena. Vanessa's eyes flashed. Fine. I want what you promised me. 3 years is long enough to wait. I never promised you anything. That's not how I remember it, and I have the letters to prove otherwise. The room felt like all the oxygen had been sucked out of it. Elena wanted to leave, to give them privacy, but something kept her rooted to the spot. Michael looked like he might be sick. Those letters were written in a moment of weakness, when I was grieving and not thinking clearly. They don't mean what you think they mean. They mean exactly what I think they mean. Vanessa pulled out her phone. Would you like me to read them out loud? Because I can, or better yet, I can send them to TMZ. Let the whole world know that Michael Barrett was having an affair with his wife's assistant before she died. Let them know that maybe Caroline's death wasn't quite the tragedy everyone thinks it was. Elena gasped. Michael looked like he'd been struck. That's a lie, he said, his voice deadly quiet. Caroline and I were happy. I never touched you, Vanessa. I never wanted to. But you wrote those letters. You told me things. You confided in me when Caroline was too busy with her films to pay attention to her own husband. I was venting to someone I thought was a friend. There was nothing romantic about it, and you know it. Vanessa's mask slipped slightly, showing the desperation underneath. You owe me, Michael. I kept your secrets. I covered for you when you were drinking too much, when you were having panic attacks on set. Caroline never knew, because I made sure she never knew. And what did I get for my loyalty? You cut me off completely after she died. You won't return my calls, you won't see me. 3 years, Michael. Because you wanted something from me I couldn't give. Michael's composure finally cracked. You wanted me to love you, and I couldn't. I didn't. I loved my wife. Only my wife. Then why the letters? Vanessa's voice rose. Why tell me all those intimate things? Why make me think there was something between us? Because I was an idiot who didn't realize you were misinterpreting friendship for something else. Michael ran his hands through his hair, looking anguished. Vanessa, I'm sorry if I gave you the wrong impression, but there was never anything between us. There never could be. Vanessa's face hardened. Then I guess I'll just have to let the world decide what those letters mean. Maybe your next movie will be about a tragic love triangle. Or maybe you'll never work again because no one wants to hire the man who might have killed his wife for her assistant. That's enough, Elena said, stepping forward. Both of them turned to look at her, seemingly having forgotten she was there. You need to leave. Now. Excuse me? Vanessa's voice dripped with condescension. This doesn't concern you, housekeeper. It concerns me, because I won't stand here and watch you blackmail a good man. Elena's voice was steady, strong. Mr. Barrett has been through enough. He's been grieving for 3 years. And now you come here with your twisted version of events, trying to manipulate him into, what exactly? A relationship? Money? Love? Vanessa said bitterly. I just wanted him to love me the way I loved him, the way I still love him. Elena's expression softened slightly. Then you should want him to be happy. Real love isn't about possession or manipulation. It's about wanting the best for someone, even if that means letting them go. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. For a moment, the calculating woman disappeared, replaced by someone lonely and desperate. I've waited 3 years. I put my life on hold thinking that once he got through his grief, he'd see me, really see me. I do see you, Vanessa, Michael said quietly. I see someone who was a good assistant to Caroline, who was kind to both of us, who I thought was a friend. But somewhere along the way, you turned that friendship into something it wasn't, and I'm sorry for not recognizing it sooner. I'm sorry for any pain I caused, but threatening me won't make me love you. It'll just destroy whatever good memories we did have. Vanessa stood there, tears running down her face, her phone still clutched in her hand. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, she lowered the phone. I don't want to hurt you, she whispered. I just wanted you to choose me. I know, Michael said gently, but that's not something I can do. It wouldn't be fair to either of us. Vanessa looked at Elena, then back at Michael. Something in her face crumbled. She would have hated me for this. Caroline, she was always kind to me, even when She couldn't finish the sentence. Even when you were in love with her husband, Elena finished softly. She probably knew, Vanessa. Women usually do. And if she was kind to you anyway, that tells you what kind of person she was. Fresh tears spilled down Vanessa's face. She nodded, unable to speak. After a moment, she turned and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she paused. I'll delete the letters, she said without turning around. I should have done it a long time ago. I'm sorry, Michael, for everything. Then she was gone, the door closing softly behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. Elena sat down beside him, maintaining a respectful distance, but close enough that he'd know he wasn't alone. I thought I was going crazy, Michael said finally. After Caroline died, Vanessa kept calling, kept showing up. She'd say things about how we'd always had this special connection, how Caroline would want her to take care of me. I started to wonder if maybe I had led her on somehow, if those letters I'd written complaining about work stress or my anxiety had been inappropriate. But they weren't. They were just letters to a friend, or who I thought was a friend. Grief makes us vulnerable, Elena said, and some people take advantage of that vulnerability. You're not responsible for her feelings, Michael. You were clear about what you wanted and what you didn't want. I should have been clearer sooner. I should have seen what was happening. You were drowning. You can't see much of anything when you're drowning. Michael looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time. How do you always know the right thing to say? I don't. I just say what I think and hope it helps. They sat in silence for a while, the afternoon sun slanting through the windows, dust motes dancing in the light. Elena thought about Vanessa, about the destructive power of unrequited love. She thought about Caroline, who'd apparently known her assistant had feelings for her husband, and had been kind anyway. She thought about Michael, carrying so much guilt and grief that he'd almost let it destroy him. The meeting with my agent went well, Michael said after a while. There's a script, an indie film about a father reconnecting with his daughter after a divorce. It's small, intimate, nothing like my old action movies, but it's good, really good. Are you going to do it? I don't know. Part of me wants to. Part of me is terrified. Of what? Of moving on, of proving Vanessa right, that I've just been waiting for the right moment to forget Caroline and start over. Elena turned to face him fully. Michael, living your life isn't forgetting Caroline. Working again isn't betraying her memory. If anything, hiding away in this house, barely eating, barely speaking, that's the betrayal. You have gifts, talents that you were meant to share with the world. Caroline knew that. She encouraged that. Would she want you to bury those gifts with her? No, Michael admitted. She'd tell me to stop being melodramatic and get back to work. Then maybe you should listen to her. Michael smiled. A real smile. The first Elena had seen from him. You're wise, you know that. I'm old. There's a difference. You're not old. 53 with aching knees and gray hair says otherwise. 53 is the new 33. Said no 53-year-old ever. They both laughed, and the sound filled the empty house with something that had been missing for far too long: hope. Over the next few weeks, Michael slowly came back to life. He started running in the mornings, taking care of his appearance again, reading scripts. He still had bad days when the grief was so heavy he could barely get out of bed. But Elena was there on those days, not pushing, just present. They fell into a comfortable routine. She'd make breakfast. He'd tell her about whatever script he was reading. She'd work around the house. He'd sometimes help her with the dishes or the laundry, just to have something to do with his hands. Sophia came over for dinner one Sunday night, at Elena's invitation. Michael was nervous, but the young woman's easy warmth and wicked sense of humor put him at ease. She told stories about her nursing rotations, the difficult patients and the rewarding moments. Michael found himself laughing more than he had in years. After Sophia left, Michael and Elena cleaned up together. Your daughter is incredible, Michael said, scraping plates into the trash. She's the best thing Roberto and I ever did. He'd be proud of her. And of you. Elena paused, dish towel in hand. You know what's strange? I can think about Roberto now without falling apart. I can remember the good times without immediately thinking about how it ended. When did that happen? Maybe around the same time I realized I could wake up in the morning without immediately wishing I hadn't. They looked at each other. A moment of recognition passing between them. Two people who'd been drowning, who'd somehow found a way to keep each other afloat. Elena, Michael started, then stopped. I need to tell you something. Her heart skipped. Okay, I'm going to do the movie. Filming starts in 6 weeks in New York. I'll be gone for about 3 months. That's wonderful, Michael. I'm so happy for you. The thing is, he set down the plate he was holding. I don't want you to think this job is ending. I want you to stay on while I'm gone. Take care of the house. And when I come back, I'd like you to still be here. If you want to be. Of course I want to be. There's something else. Michael seemed nervous, which was unusual for him now. I know this is probably inappropriate, and you can absolutely say no, but I was wondering if maybe, when I get back, we could have dinner together, not as employer and employee, as friends, or maybe more than friends, if you were open to that. Elena's breath caught. She hadn't expected this. She'd been so focused on helping Michael heal that she hadn't stopped to examine her own feelings. But now, standing in his kitchen with dishwater on her hands and his eyes on her face, she realized the truth. She cared about him deeply. Michael, I'm 53 years old, she said carefully. You're a movie star about to restart his career. I'm a housekeeper from El Salvador with a daughter in college and stretch marks and gray hair. And I'm a washed-up actor with panic attacks and PTSD from a car accident who spent 3 years basically catatonic in his own house. Michael countered. Elena, I don't care about any of that surface stuff. I care that you saw me at my worst and didn't run away. I care that you made this house feel like a home again. I care that you understand grief because you've lived it too. I care that when you laugh, it makes me want to laugh. When you sing while you're cleaning, it makes me want to sing too. I sing terribly. You sing beautifully. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. It's too soon for both of us. Maybe, probably. But can we at least try? When I get back, just dinner, just talking, we'll take it slow. We'll figure it out together. Elena thought about Roberto, about the love they'd shared, about the life they'd built. She thought about Caroline, the brilliant director who'd owned Michael's heart. She thought about how grief had brought her and Michael together, how they'd helped each other remember how to be human again. Yes, she said finally, when you come back, we'll have dinner. We'll take it slow. We'll figure it out together. Michael's smile was radiant. He reached out, hesitated, then gently took her hand. His fingers were warm, slightly damp from the dishwater. It was the first intentional touch they'd shared, and it felt like a promise. The 6 weeks passed quickly. Michael threw himself into preparation for the role, working with a trainer to get back in shape, meeting with the director and his co-stars via video calls. Elena watched him transform back into himself, or maybe into a new version of himself, someone who carried his grief more lightly, who could smile without it feeling like betrayal. The night before he left for New York, they had dinner together on the back patio. Elena had made his favorite meal, the one he'd requested, her grandmother's recipe for pollo guisado with rice and beans. They talked about everything and nothing, about his hopes for the film, and her plans to redecorate the guest room while he was gone. I'm nervous, Michael admitted as they finished dessert. What if I've forgotten how to act? What if I get on set and just freeze? You won't. You're too talented to forget. And even if you do freeze, you'll remember. You'll find your way through it, just like you found your way through everything else. Elena Morales, eternal optimist. Elena Morales, eternal realist. There's a difference. Michael reached across the table and took her hand. Thank you for everything, for saving my life. You saved your own life. I just reminded you why it was worth saving. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it softly. The gesture was old-fashioned, gentle, full of promise. Elena's heart stuttered. 3 months, he said, and then we'll have that dinner. 3 months, she agreed. Michael left early the next morning, before dawn. Elena heard his car pulling out of the garage and stood at her bedroom window, watching his taillights disappear down the driveway. The house suddenly felt very empty, but she had work to do. She threw herself into deep cleaning, organizing, redecorating. Sophia came over to help paint the guest room a warm terracotta color. They talked about Michael, about Elena's unexpected feelings for him, about whether it was too soon. Mom, you deserve to be happy, Sophia said, carefully edging the trim around the window. Daddy would want you to be happy. I know, but it feels strange, caring about someone new. It's not strange. It's human, and Michael seems like a good guy. He makes you smile. He does, Elena admitted. The weeks passed. Michael called every few days, telling her about the filming, the challenges of getting back into the rhythm of a set, the terror and exhilaration of performing again. His voice grew stronger, more confident. Elena could hear him healing in real time. Then, about 8 weeks into his trip, the calls stopped. At first, Elena wasn't worried. Filming schedules were unpredictable, and he'd warned her there might be stretches where he'd be too busy to call. But 3 days became a week, and a week became 2. She texted, no response. She called, voicemail. A cold fear began to settle in Elena's chest. Had he changed his mind about her? Had he realized that what he felt was gratitude, not attraction? Had the distance given him perspective on how inappropriate their potential relationship was? Or worse, had something happened to him? She called his agent, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. The agent was polite, but vague. Mr. Barrett was fine, just very busy with final reshoots. He'd be back soon. But soon came and went. The 3-month mark passed. Michael's return date came and went with no word. The house felt like a mausoleum again, echoing with Elena's footsteps and her growing dread. Then, on a Tuesday morning exactly 100 days after Michael had left for New York, Elena arrived at the house to find his car in the garage. Her heart leapt. He was back. But why hadn't he called? Why hadn't he let her know? She let herself in through the kitchen door as usual and immediately knew something was wrong. The energy in the house felt dark, oppressive. She found Michael in his study, sitting in the same chair where she'd first spoken to him months ago, staring out the window at the city below. Michael. Her voice was tentative. He didn't turn around. Michael, what happened? I was so worried. You should go. His voice was flat, emotionless. Elena felt like she'd been slapped. What? I said you should go. I'll pay you for the rest of the month, but your services are no longer needed. I don't understand. What happened in New York? What? Nothing happened in New York. The movie is done. I'm back. And I've realized that I was using you as a crutch, as a distraction from my real problems. It was unfair to you, and I apologize. But it needs to end. Elena's mind reeled. This was the old Michael, the shut-down Michael from months ago. Whatever progress they'd made, whatever connection they'd built, seemed to have evaporated. I don't believe you, she said, her voice shaking. Something happened. Talk to me. There's nothing to talk about. Please respect my wishes and leave. No. That finally made him turn around. His face was haggard, dark circles under his eyes, his jaw tight, but it was his eyes that scared her. They were dead again. Hollow. Elena, don't make this harder than it has to be. Then don't lie to me. Don't throw away everything we built together without at least telling me why. Because I don't owe you an explanation. His voice rose, filling the room with anger. You're my employee, not my therapist, not my friend, and certainly not anything more than that. I made a mistake, got confused, but I'm thinking clearly now. I want you to leave my house and not come back. The words hit like physical blows. Elena stood there, tears streaming down her face, unable to comprehend how the man who'd held her hand and kissed it so tenderly could be this cruel. Is this about Vanessa? She asked suddenly. Did she? This has nothing to do with Vanessa. This is about me realizing I need to deal with my grief on my own, without dragging other people into my mess. But you're not a mess anymore. You were getting better. I was pretending, Michael roared, standing up so fast his chair toppled backward. I was pretending to be okay so you'd stop looking at me with those pitying eyes. I was pretending Caroline's death didn't destroy me. But it did. It destroyed everything. And no amount of home-cooked meals and supportive conversations is going to fix that. Elena flinched, but held her ground. You're lying. You're pushing me away because you're scared. Because things were getting real between us, and that terrifies you. You don't know what you're talking about. Yes, I do. Because I'm scared too. Because caring about you means risking my heart again. And I wasn't sure I had any heart left to risk. But I was willing to try. We both were. Well, I'm not willing anymore, Michael said coldly. So please, leave. Elena looked at him. This man she'd come to care for so deeply. This man who'd helped her heal even as she was helping him. She wanted to fight. Wanted to break through whatever wall he'd rebuilt around himself. But she also knew that you couldn't force someone to accept love. They had to choose it. Okay, she said quietly. I'll go. But Michael, whatever happened in New York, whatever made you close yourself off again, it's not going to work. You've already learned how to live again. You can't unlearn that, no matter how hard you try. She turned and walked out of the study, down the stairs, through the kitchen where they'd shared so many conversations. She left her key on the counter, grabbed her purse, and walked out the front door for the last time. She made it to her car before the sobs came, great heaving things that shook her entire body. She cried for Michael, for herself, for the connection that had been severed so brutally. She cried for Roberto, because somehow this new loss had reopened that old wound. She cried until there were no tears left, until she was empty. Then she drove home. Sophia found her that evening, sitting on the couch in the dark, staring at nothing. Mom? Sophia's voice was full of concern. What happened? Elena told her everything. Sophia listened, her face growing angrier with each word. That's selfish, Sophia bit off the curse. After everything you did for him? After you helped him come back to life? He's hurting, Mija. People do terrible things when they're hurting. That's not an excuse. No, but it's an explanation. Sophia sat down beside her mother, pulling her into a hug. You're too good, you know that? Too forgiving, maybe, but I understand him. That's the problem. I understand him too well. 3 days passed. Elena tried to move on, tried to focus on her daughter, on finding new work, on anything but the ache in her chest. But on the 4th day, Sophia came home from her nursing shift with news. I found out what happened, she said, her face pale. Elena looked up from the resume she'd been updating. What do you mean? Michael Barrett. I asked around at the hospital. One of the older nurses. She has a friend who's a publicist in the entertainment industry. Mom, Michael got diagnosed with something in New York. Something serious. Elena's blood ran cold. What? Sophia sat down, taking her mother's hands. Early onset dementia. The same thing Caroline's father died from. That's why he shut you out. He didn't want you to watch him deteriorate. The room spun. Elena couldn't breathe. No, that can't be right. He's only 45. It happens. It's rare, but it happens. Apparently he started having symptoms on set, forgetting lines, getting confused about blocking. They sent him to doctors in New York. The diagnosis came back 2 weeks ago. Everything clicked into place. The missed calls, the sudden return, the cruel words designed to push her away. Michael was trying to protect her from watching him slowly lose himself, the same way Caroline must have watched her father disappear piece by piece. I have to go to him, Elena said, standing up. Mom, are you sure? He made his choice. He made the wrong choice, and I'm not going to let him face this alone. Elena drove to Beverly Hills with her heart pounding. The gates were closed, but she'd memorized the code months ago. She punched it in and drove up to the house. His car was there. She rang the doorbell, knocked, rang again. Finally, the door opened. Michael stood there, looking even worse than he had 4 days ago. His hair was uncombed, his eyes red-rimmed. When he saw her, something broke in his face. Elena, I told you. I know about the diagnosis, she said simply. Michael's entire body seemed to sag. How? Does it matter? Can I come in? He stood aside, letting her enter. They walked to the living room in silence. Michael sank onto the couch, and Elena sat beside him. It's early onset familial dementia, Michael said finally, his voice hollow. Caroline's father had it. He died when he was 52, and by the end, he didn't recognize anyone, not even Caroline. She used to have nightmares about it, about losing herself that way. And now I'm going to... His voice broke. Elena reached for his hand, and this time, he didn't pull away. The doctors say I have maybe 5 to 7 good years. He couldn't finish. So you decided to spend those 5 to 7 years alone, pushing away everyone who cares about you? I can't ask you to watch me disappear, Elena. I can't ask anyone to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. Elena turned to face him fully. Michael, I watched my husband die slowly. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I never once regretted being there, holding his hand, loving him until the very end, because that's what love is. It's not just being there for the good times. It's staying for the hard times too. This isn't your burden to carry, and it's not yours to carry alone. Elena's voice was firm. You've already lost so much time to grief. Are you really going to waste the time you have left isolating yourself? I don't want you to remember me like that. Confused, angry, not knowing who you are. Then we'll make sure I have plenty of good memories to balance it out. Michael, nobody knows how much time they really have. Roberto and I thought we had decades left. We got months. You might have 7 years, you might have more. But however much time you have, don't you want to spend it living instead of hiding? Michael looked at her, really looked at her. And Elena saw the fear there, the terror of losing control, of slowly becoming someone else. But she also saw hope, fragile and tentative. I'm scared, he whispered. I know, I'm scared too, but we'll be scared together. What if I forget you? What if I look at you one day and don't know who you are? Then I'll remind you, every day if I have to. I'll tell you about the first time we really talked, about how you came downstairs with an empty plate and thanked me for lunch. I'll tell you about the dinners we shared, the conversations, the way you made me remember how to laugh again. I'll tell you our story, until it's written in both our hearts so deep that even dementia can't erase it completely. Tears were streaming down Michael's face now. I don't deserve you. Love isn't about deserving. It's about choosing. And I choose you, Michael Barrett, for however long we have. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the only solid thing in a world that was spinning out of control. They stayed like that for a long time, two broken people who'd found a way to be whole together, even in the face of impossible odds. Over the following weeks, they adjusted to their new reality. Michael started treatment, experimental medications that might slow the progression. He worked with his agent to be selective about projects, wanting to work while he still could, but not wanting to take on anything too demanding. He put his affairs in order, made sure his will was updated, set up trusts, and he let Elena in, fully, completely. They had that dinner he'd promised, and then another, and another. They held hands while watching movies. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. They kissed for the first time on the back patio under the stars, and it felt like coming home. Sophia was wary at first, protective of her mother, but when she saw how happy Elena was, how Michael treated her with such tenderness and respect, she came around. The three of them became a family of sorts, having dinners together, celebrating holidays. Michael helped Sophia study for her nursing exams, and she taught him memory exercises that might help slow his cognitive decline. 6 months after the diagnosis, Michael completed his indie film. It premiered at Sundance and received standing ovations. Critics called it the performance of his career, raw and honest and heartbreaking. He didn't win any awards. The film was too small, too quiet, but he didn't care. He'd proven to himself that he could still do the work he loved. One evening, about a year after Elena had learned about his condition, they sat on the back patio watching the sunset, paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I've been thinking," Michael said, his fingers interlaced with hers. "I want to marry you." Elena's heart skipped. "Michael, I know it's complicated. I know the timing is terrible, but I love you, Elena. You brought me back to life twice, once from grief and once from giving up entirely. I want whatever time I have left to be spent as your husband, if you'll have me." Elena thought about all the reasons to say no, the inevitable heartbreak, the difficult years ahead, the fact that people would say she was taking advantage of a sick man or that he was being impulsive. But then she thought about Roberto's words, the ones she'd shared with Michael that first day she'd really spoken to him. Grief isn't something you get over. It's something you learn to carry, like a stone in your pocket. She'd carried her grief for Roberto, and she'd carry her grief for Michael when the time came. But in between, there would be love, there would be life. There would be moments like this, watching the sunset with someone who understood her completely. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." They were married in a small ceremony in the garden behind the house, with Sophia as Elena's maid of honor, and Michael's agent standing as his best man. There were no reporters, no cameras, just the people they loved most. Elena wore a simple cream-colored dress. Michael cried when he saw her walking toward him. The years that followed were a mixture of joy and challenge. Michael had good days and bad days. Some mornings he'd wake up confused about where he was. Some evenings he'd struggle to remember the names of old friends. But Elena was always there, patient and steady, reminding him of who he was. They traveled when he felt up to it. Paris, Rome, back to El Salvador to meet Elena's extended family. They made love slowly, tenderly, memorizing each other. They laughed at inside jokes and cried during hard moments. They lived. 3 years into their marriage, Michael did a small guest role on a television show, playing a father with dementia. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, but he wanted to do it, wanted to bring awareness to the disease. His performance was devastating. He won an Emmy for it. At the ceremony, with Elena beside him in a borrowed designer gown, he gave a speech that had everyone in tears. "This disease is going to take a lot from me," he said, gripping his award. "It's going to take my memories, my ability to work, maybe eventually my ability to recognize the people I love, but it hasn't taken everything. Not yet. I've had 4 of the best years of my life since my diagnosis, and that's because of the woman sitting right there." He pointed to Elena, who was crying openly. "She taught me that love isn't about perfect timing or ideal circumstances. It's about showing up, even when things are hard, especially when things are hard. So this award isn't really mine, it's ours, for everyone who's ever loved someone through impossible situations. For everyone who's ever chosen to stay when leaving would be easier. Thank you." The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. 4 years after the diagnosis, Michael started to decline more noticeably. He'd forget conversations they'd had that morning. He'd get lost in his own house. Sometimes he'd call Elena Caroline, and she'd gently correct him, reminding him who she was. It hurt, but she'd known it was coming. Sophia, now a practicing nurse, helped Elena set up care systems. They hired additional help, people who could assist with Michael's daily needs as he became less independent. But Elena was always the constant, always the one there when he woke up confused and scared, always the one to hold him and remind him that he was safe, that he was loved. On a Tuesday afternoon in late spring, 5 years after the diagnosis, Michael had a moment of perfect clarity. Elena was reading in the chair beside his bed when he reached for her hand. "Elena," he said, his voice clear. She looked up, surprised. He'd been mostly nonverbal for the past 2 months. "I need to tell you something while I still can." "What is it, mi amor?" "I know I don't remember everything anymore. I know there are days when I don't know who you are. But even on those days, even when my mind is completely gone, my heart knows you. It always will." Elena's tears fell hot and fast. "I love you, Michael. I love you too. Thank you for staying. Thank you for every moment. There's nowhere else I'd rather be." He smiled, that beautiful smile she'd fallen in love with, and closed his eyes. Within minutes, he was asleep again, peaceful. That was the last fully coherent conversation they had. Michael lingered for another 18 months, sometimes lucid, more often lost in a fog of confusion. But even in his darkest moments, when he didn't recognize Elena, didn't know where he was, he'd respond to her touch, her voice. Some part of him always knew she was safety, comfort, love. Michael Barrett died on a quiet October morning with Elena holding his hand and Sophia sitting at the foot of the bed. He was 52 years old. His last words, whispered so softly Elena almost missed them, were, "Thank you." The world mourned the loss of a great actor. Think pieces were written about his brief but brilliant return to film. His Emmy-winning performance was studied in acting classes, but for Elena, the loss was personal and profound. She'd lost her second great love, and the grief was almost unbearable. Almost. Because as she stood at his funeral, listening to people share stories about Michael's talent and generosity, she realized something. Michael had been right all those years ago when he'd said he couldn't ask her to watch him disappear. He couldn't ask, but she'd chosen, and she'd choose it again, 1,000 times over. The years they'd had together, the laughter, the tears, the quiet moments and the extraordinary ones, had been worth every second of pain. She'd helped him live fully in the time he had left, and in doing so, she'd learned to live again, herself. 6 months after Michael's death, Elena was cleaning out his study when she found a letter tucked inside his favorite book. It was addressed to her in his handwriting, but the handwriting was shaky, uneven. He must have written it early in his decline, when he could still hold a pen, but was already losing fine motor control. "My dearest Elena," it read, "if you're reading this, then the disease has taken me, and you're left to pick up the pieces. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for a lot of things, but I'm not sorry for loving you. I'm not sorry for the time we had together. You saved me twice, once from grief and once from fear. You taught me that hiding from life isn't the same as living it. You showed me that love is worth the risk of loss. Thank you for choosing me, even when I tried to push you away. Thank you for staying. Thank you for every moment. Please don't spend too long grieving. Caroline wouldn't want that for me, and I don't want that for you. Live, Elena. Live boldly and fully, the way you taught me to do. And know that wherever I am, I'm grateful. Forever yours, Michael." Elena cried as she read it, but they were different tears than before. Not just tears of grief, but tears of gratitude. She'd been given a gift, the love of 2 extraordinary men, the chance to build a life from ruins not once but twice, the knowledge that she was strong enough to survive anything. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in a box with other treasures, photos of her and Michael, the program from their wedding, the speech he'd given at the Emmys. Then she closed the box and placed it on a shelf in her bedroom. Sophia found her there an hour later, staring out the window at the garden where she and Michael had been married. "You okay, Mom?" "I am," Elena said, and meant it. "I really am. What are you going to do now?" Elena thought about it. Michael had left her financially comfortable. Not wealthy, but secure. She didn't need to work. She could spend her days however she wanted. "I think," she said slowly, "I'm going to start a support group for families dealing with dementia. I learned so much caring for Michael. Maybe I can help other people going through the same thing." Sophia smiled. "He'd love that." "I know." Elena Morales lived another 27 years. She started her support group, which grew into a non-profit organization. She spoke at conferences about caregiver support. She visited patients in nursing homes, sat with them when their own families couldn't or wouldn't. She traveled with Sophia and her eventual grandchildren. She learned to paint, took cooking classes, joined a book club. She dated occasionally, but never remarried. She'd had 2 great loves, and that was enough. Their memories kept her company on lonely nights, and their lessons guided her through challenges. When she died at 80, surrounded by family and friends, her last words were about Roberto and Michael. "I'll see you both soon," she whispered, smiling. And maybe she did. Because if this story has taught us anything, it's that love doesn't end with death. It transforms, shifts, becomes something else. The grief becomes manageable. The pain becomes bearable. The memories become treasures. Michael Barrett hadn't felt love since his wife died, but Elena Morales broke through his silence with patience, kindness, and her own hard-won understanding of grief. She showed him that it was possible to love again, even when it seemed impossible, even when it was destined to end in heartbreak. And in the end, isn't that what all love is? A choice to open yourself up to joy, knowing that loss is inevitable, a decision to live fully, even when you know the story can only end one way. Michael and Elena chose love, over and over again. In the face of grief, disease, and impossible odds, they chose each other. They chose life, and for whatever time they had together, they made it count. That's not a tragedy. That's a triumph. That's not the end. That's the whole point.